Hello and welcome in to the IDP Show. I'm your host, Evan Ronda, and I'm joined here with the one and only Joey the Tooth from the IDP guys. Joey, how you doing today?
I am very good. How about yourself, bud?
I'm doing great. It's been a long day. I just saw that Christian McCaffrey got injured, so it looks like it's going to be an even longer night. So, what better way than to not watch the rest of this game and just talk about IDP instead? Am I right?
Yeah, 100% because DJ Moore just limped off the field too. So,
Oh, wonderful. That's exactly what I needed to hear.
yep, exciting
Oof.
news.
All right. Let's get right into this thing. So, today we're going to be talking about some sleepers for the upcoming week. And you have some amazing research and analysis you've done prep for us that you're going to share with the listeners and the viewers today. And your first guy, we realized this as we were beginning to record. The Carolina Panthers do play tonight. So, this might not be actionable information, but this can be an I told you so. I promise I can vouch for Joey. He wrote this ahead of time. So everything he said ended up coming true. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this first. So why don't you go ahead and start us off with the defensive end from the Panthers, Morgan Fox.
All right. Yeah, so these are kind of some deeper sleepers for kind of those deep leagues. I play in a lot of 12 team, 16 team leagues with like 50-man rosters. So I've learned to kind of sort through the waiver wire quite deep. Morgan Fox has been a guy. He signed with Carolina in the offseason. He's playing with Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns, who are the two big pass rushers off the edge, but he's still playing over 50% of snaps, 51% week one, 59% week two. Week two, he upped his pressure. He has 2 tackles and he came up with half a sack and he had 3 QB hits. So I figure he's coming in. He's playing Houston, who now is without Tyrod Taylor. They're going to have Davis Mills. So who knows what's going to happen with him? They're either going to run the ball a lot, which Morgan Fox is really good in run defense, or he's going to hold on to the ball too long, and it's going to be just a terrible, terrible ending for him. Um, that entire team, like the run blocking is terrible, pass blocking is okay, but again, it's a rookie quarterback who's not supposed to see the field. So I figure with all the pressure coming from Brian Burns, Hassan Reddick, Morgan Fox, there's going to be a lot of cleanup. And he actually does have half a sack tonight, 2 tackles and half a sack. So it did pan out somewhat so far. We're going into the fourth quarter, so I'm going to take a half a check mark for that one.
There we go. I love it. Yeah, going into this game, the PFF offensive line, defensive line matchup tool said that the Panthers had the second highest pressure rate in the league, behind only my very own Steelers. And they've converted those pressures at the fourth highest rate in the league. So that's pretty impressive as a unit. And Houston has a league average offensive line by pass blocking metrics and one of the worst run blocking lines in the league. So that definitely spells good things for Morgan Fox. And as we just discussed, it looks like that is exactly what we've seen come to fruition. So now on to predicting the future and things that have not yet occurred. Let's go ahead and talk about your next guy, this edge, Malik Reed from the Denver Broncos.
All right, Malik Reed. He's usually the third guy coming in. He's the guy spelling Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. If you look across that entire defensive line of the Denver Broncos, I mean, you have Bradley Chubb, you have Von Miller, you have Draymond Jones, Shelby Harris, and Malik Reed. All of them can get at the quarterback, so they have just tremendous pressure. Bradley Chubb just went down with he's got a lingering ankle injury, so they actually put him on IR. So it's going to be Malik Reed that's coming in to play on the other side of Von Miller. So uh, Reed's been playing. He's been on 66.5% of the team snaps already this year, so he already has an expanded role. Last year, Von Miller went down, and he ended up having a huge year. He had it was a 53 tackles, 8 for a loss, and 8 sacks with 17 QB hits, making 13 starts for the Broncos last year. So it's a very good chance he puts up similar production. He also goes against the Jets, who have given up a league most 5 sacks so far. And Zach Wilson just looked incredibly uncomfortable in the pocket last week. He gave up 4 interceptions, and what was it? I think he got sacked 3 times last week, 3 or 4 times last week alone. So I think Malik Reed has a great chance. Plus, he's playing across from Von Miller, who doesn't look like he's 32 years old. In 2 games, he has 5 tackles, all for a loss, and 3 sacks. So there's nowhere near any pressure that's going to be on Malik Reed. He's going to get one-on-one matchups all night. Von Miller's going to get all the pressure, and then you have Draymond Jones still and Shelby Harris in the middle. So it's just going to be a bad night for Zach Wilson. I think Malik Reed could have a nice game.
I love this call, especially with Chubb heading out. A lot of people probably aren't on top of this yet just because it hasn't happened yet. So seeing this ahead of time is definitely a good call. I don't know if you saw that new Zach Wilson quote. He basically said he's going to be approaching football differently. So I guess maybe this time he decided he's going to be good. I don't know why he didn't start with that, but we'll see. We'll see how that pans out for him when he's got all those players rushing him. This next guy is going to be pretty rad. I think you've called out this linebacker from the Denver Broncos, Justin Sternad. So why don't you go ahead and talk about him?
I actually liked him coming out last year in college. He's a very good coverage linebacker. Even as a rookie with Josie Jewell and AJ Johnson both there, he was actually playing in sub packages already during preseason and during the training camp. But this was last year. But unfortunately, he had an injury that kept him out the entire season. So Josie Jewell kind of proved himself last year. He had a career year. So going into this year, it was Sternad was kind of on the back burner, and then it was Jewell and Johnson. Jewell in week 1 was a 100% snap guy. He played every single snap, and Johnson played 84%. Jewell went down in week 2 and is now in IR with a shoulder injury. So I think Johnson's probably going to shift to that 100% snap role, but I do believe Sternad's going to be the next guy up to fill that like 85% role. And he's easily the best coverage linebacker they have. I mean, I think it was last week. I think he played on 41% of the snaps after Jewell left, and he finished with 6 tackles, still 4 of them solo. So he's obviously got a nose for the football. Again, he plays the New York Jets. I mean, the New York Jets have just been giving out IDP points for anybody. So Sternad, he has a great chance. AJ Johnson, he'll probably rack up a lot of tackles, but I can see Sternad being a guy in coverage, maybe a lot of dump offs out of the backfield with Michael Carter. I think they're going to try to get rid of the ball quickly for Wilson because last week he had 4 interceptions, and I think he was sacked 3 or 4 times. So it's going to be relieving pressure off of Wilson. So it could be quick dump offs, some easy tackles for some linebackers. And they did sign Micah Kaiser, but it's going to be Sternad getting the role because Kaiser is kind of the same thing of what AJ Johnson's. He can't cover. This is why the Rams let him go. He's just not a coverage guy, and he showed that last year when he lost his snaps to Troy Reeder, who in his own right isn't a good coverage guy. So it's still going to be Sternad, and I think it's a really good pickup, and it could be for the rest of the season too.
Yeah, I love this call. Plus, Kaiser is still pretty new to the team. You have to imagine he's not as comfortable with the defensive scheme.
Right.
Talk
Oh,
about
plus,
guys that aren't new. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
oh no, I was going to say one thing I missed is the Jets gave up 8 tackles to Juwan Bentley last week. So I mean,
All
Juwan
right
Bentley's
then.
not really anything special. So
Yeah, I love it. And I had this wonderful transition idea in my head of, speaking of guys that aren't new, man, Alec Ogletree, you have called out here, the linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Blast from the past. Why don't you go ahead and talk about this guy?
yeah, it was Alec Ogletree is kind of a guy everybody's just kind of wrote off, whatever, and rightfully so. I mean, he had his first few years with the Rams were good. He was a very good player. I mean, good IDP production. He was good in coverage. Well, his numbers were good in coverage. So his entire career has been marred by just missed tackles. He's never been an efficient tackler. He can put up good numbers, much like Zach Cunningham, puts up a lot of good numbers, but as an actual NFL player, not that great, incredibly inefficient. So he spent 2 years in New York with the Giants after the Rams. Still looked pretty good on paper, but his missed tackles just kept him off the field really for sub packages. And then he was released and then signed with the Jets for I think 2 games last year, and then the Jets released him. So it's pretty much you wrote him off for dead. But then he signs on with the Bears this offseason. Danny Trevathan goes on IR, and he actually looks halfway decent in preseason to where he wins an actual starting linebacker role next to Roquan Smith. So I mean, he's played 75% of snaps within the first 2 games of the season. Last week he had 3 tackles, 1 pass defended, and a QB hit. They take on the Cleveland Browns this week, who is just incredibly run heavy. Plus, they throw the ball to Kareem Hunt out of the backfield quite often. Ogletree does have the athleticism, though not the skill, but he has the athleticism to get to Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. And I think it's going to be a heavy dose of the run game from the Browns. So that linebacker unit, Roquan Smith and Alec Ogletree, have the opportunity to rack up some serious tackles. So as much as it sounds weird to say, Alec Ogletree could have a good game.
Crazy. I love it. I love it. All right, let's go ahead and transition to a new team, the Los Angeles Rams. You have Darius Williams, the defensive back over there, called out. What do you like about this guy?
I like everything about him. I mean, his first 2 games this season, he's got 7 tackles in each game, and I think it was 13 of the 14 are solo. He's got 2 passes defended. Last year, it was a breakout year for him. He had 44 tackles, 14 passes defended, and 4 interceptions. He's kind of taken on more of a kind of a number 1 cornerback role for the Rams because Jalen Ramsey now has a different role. He's now playing what they're calling the star role. So he's playing more slot, more near the line of scrimmage. So Darius Williams is going to be that guy that's going to be covering number 1s. And I think he's going to be targeted more often than normal number 1 corners because he's kind of he's on that tier of like number 1, number 2. So he's not like good enough to be a number 1, but he's covering number 1 wide receivers. So he's going to have some heavy targets. He's playing Tampa Bay, who's thrown the ball 86 times in the first 2 weeks, and they love throwing to their wide receivers. I mean, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown's going to be out because, well, he should be out. I don't think he's going to make it back, but he's on the COVID list. Gronkowski had a decent amount of targets last week, but I don't think that's going to be on a weekly basis. I think that was just more scheme dependent and game flow dependent. But I mean, 86 passes in 2 weeks. That's ridiculous. So, I mean, Darius Williams has a great opportunity to put up number 1 tackles and passes defended. So, if you're in a cornerback start league, throw out Darius Williams definitely. And he's available almost everywhere.
I love it. That just spells opportunity. So good call
Yeah.
there. You have some IDP position matchups in general picked out just for position groups in general that you're a big fan of going into this week. So let's go ahead and transition away from these players that we've been discussing and talk about these position groups next. So let's first start off with this defensive line group from the Denver Broncos that we hit on a little bit earlier, but let's flesh this out a little more. Go for that.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I mean, Von Miller himself, he already has 3 sacks. And then you add in Malik Reed, who had 8 himself last year, Draymond Jones, who also had a breakout year, and Shelby Harris. And it spells trouble for Zach Wilson. They've given up the league high 5 sacks. So it's going to be pressure from all angles, up the middle, off the edge. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sent a couple linebackers on blitz. That they're going to do everything they can to keep Zach Wilson uncomfortable after watching how inefficient he was with the football last week. So, excuse me. So I think Malik Reed and Von Miller are going to have huge years. Von Miller's just, I don't understand
Mm,
how the man does it. 32 years old, and he's just unbelievable. He has a couple of down years, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's just back to his old self. It's like he's healthy. Taking time off last year was great for him, I guess. But
mhm.
yeah, the Denver Broncos are going to wreak havoc on the New York Jets offensive line.
Absolutely. Poor Zach Wilson, this guy.
I know,
Yeah.
and it's kinda like that same deal with Sam Darnold back then, huh? It's like you throw
Hmm.
him on a team with a terrible offensive line and just, it starts the career off really rocky.
I feel bad for the guy. I really do.
I do
A little
too.
bonus thing here for these Jets offensive line versus the Broncos defensive line. So the Jets have the second worst pass block advantage, according to the PFF offensive line defensive line matchup, and a below average run block advantage. So, I mean, that just goes right in with everything you were saying. That is going to be an absolute massacre. Another defensive line I wanted to call out. I'm basically choking on all of the chalk over here because I talked about the Steelers defensive line. It's like, wow, Evan, really insightful news there talking about the Steelers defensive line. But the reason that I'm a big fan of the Steelers defensive line this week is they have a really, really nice matchup against the Bengals. The Bengals have the lowest pass block advantage in the entire league, and the second worst run block advantage in the league.
Whew.
Their offensive line is garbage.
Yeah, it's just hot
Garbage.
trash.
So
Hot
I know
trash.
most of these guys are probably rostered in most places, but if you happen to, have the ability to pick up some guy that's not rostered on that Steelers defensive line, TJ Watt's probably rostered, but Alex Highsmith, Melvin Ingram, Cam Hayward, if any of these guys are available, they should eat this week.
Mm-hmm.
So enough
Yeah.
defensive line. Go for it.
Well, Melvin Ingram, he might actually have a bigger role this week because they're talking TJ Watt's iffy right now with his groin injury. And I mean, if it's against the Bengals, I'm not going to rush TJ Watt out there and end his season by aggravating that groin going up against them. I mean, you have enough pass rushes to where you can still win that game.
That's a great call. Yeah, I like that a
Yeah.
lot. Let's go ahead and transition into the linebacker group. And you have the Colts linebackers called out right here. What do you like about this group?
Darius Leonard's actually my linebacker one. I think he's phenomenal. I mean, a lot of people jumped to Devin White after his season last year because of all the sacks he had, and he had 140 tackles as well. But before I jumped on Devin White, I wanted him to see it do it more than 1 year because after 2 games, he doesn't even have 1 sack. Darius Leonard, he's done it every single year he's been in the league. He's had 3 seasons, I think, of at least 130 or 125 tackles. He's had, except for I think in his first 3 seasons, he has 7 interceptions. I think he's averaged 4 sacks per season. So it's not just one stat line. He fills the entire stat line. So Darius Leonard is he's my LB1 overall. Bobby Okereke, he's been pretty hot this year, and he was one of my guys who's kind of like the Dre Greenlaw of last year. He's a guy he's not going to stuff the stat sheet, but it's kind of like the old Anthony Walker role. That's just, you're there to soak up tackles. And he's been doing that this year. And they get to take on Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, and you know what the Titans like to do with Derrick Henry? It's just feed him the ball and feed him the ball and feed him the ball. So I think it's just going to be another heavy dose of Derrick Henry. The Titans are just going to say, we're going to give Derrick Henry the ball until somebody can stop him. So I think as a linebacker group, Darius Leonard and Bobby Okereke have a great chance to rack up some tackles.
I love this call. That's going to be a very interesting game. We'll have to see what happens at the quarterback position for the Colts, but their defensive, especially linebacker group, is going to be a fun one to watch against Derrick Henry. The last group you wanted to talk about is the defensive back group from the Los Angeles Rams. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but you just wanted to put a highlight on this group as a whole. Why?
Mainly matchup. I mean, the group as a whole is actually very talented. Like we said, Darius Williams earlier, Jalen Ramsey in that star role. But then you bring on David Long Jr. He's their third corner. He's actually played very well this season. And then you have Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller, who both interchange between safety positions. Both can play in the box. Both can play deep. Both are playmaking safeties. And again, you're playing Tampa Bay, who has thrown the ball 86 times. So if you have anybody that plays the defensive back for the Rams, there's a very good chance to see some high volume. And it's probably going to be a very tight game. So there's going to be a lot of passing going on because both the Rams and the Buccaneers have looked very good this year, and both have very good passing offenses. So I think that this defensive back group of Los Angeles Rams could put up some nice IDP production this week.
I love it. Plus, I don't necessarily expect those running offenses to be all that effective. So there's some more
No,
encouragement for a passing
yeah,
game.
banged up
Well, I love it.
Darrell Henderson and whatever you
Yeah.
have in Tampa Bay.
Seriously. It's such a mess. It has been a disaster trying to manage that backfield for fantasy this season. I've just stayed away.
Yep, I have too much of it, unfortunately. I played
Any
that
of it is
role
too
of
much of it. So I'm right there with
yeah,
you.
exactly. It's been tough. I played a lot of that. I'm gonna wait a little bit on the running back, grab one, and then I'll wait for some more. So it's like that. I'm gonna grab Ronald Jones, and then I'm also just gonna get Leonard Fournette just to back him up just in case. And it's like, all right, this sucks.
Oh, great. Can I drop these guys already, please?
Exactly.
All
It's
right.
been tough.
Well, these have been some really great calls. I am super excited to see how they pan out this week. You've put a lot of work into this, and you have an entire article dedicated to just these sleepers. Is there anything you wanted to touch on regarding that before we bring this episode to a close?
Yeah. So every Saturday, morning it's going to come out with IDP guys. I do an entire sleeper article. I usually do about 5 names per week. So far, I am at least 70% hit rate. If you want to give me Kendall Fuller week 1, he had 5 tackles as a cornerback. I'll take it. That'll put it at 80%, but I'm going to keep him out for now because it wasn't that impressive. But as deep sleepers, I mean, even week 1, I went 4 of 5, so it was pretty good. So I'm having a
Awesome.
lot of fun doing it, and playing in these deep leagues. I'm telling you, if you're gonna play IDP, start playing some of these deep leagues, like start 11 and like 50, 53 man rosters, just because you start. People say it's too tedious, but you learn some of these names, and it's like it gives you a better way of actually like reading teams, reading defenses, figuring out who plays sub packages. It helps you understand the game. So that's one reason why I really love IDP.
Awesome. And hey, what better way to dive into it than reading an article that spells it all out for you, right?
Exactly. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Hey, is there any other shout outs, anything else coming up that you want to discuss before we close this out?
Um, I'll be back on the mic again on Saturday on the IDP Lounge. You can join us. I believe we have some of the guys from the Debbie Royale group joining us, so we might be talking some college football Saturday night. So it's usually fun on the IDP Lounge. We kind of just go off the rails half the time, talk football half the time, but that's kind of the point. Just kind of get everybody in the community to get to know each other and just have some fun. And that doesn't always have to be serious. You know what I mean?
I love it. Lounging around, talking
Yeah,
IDP. Just a bunch of
exactly.
dudes being bros.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, that is it for today's episode. You can find Joey over at Joey the Tooth IDP on Twitter. You can find me at BGT Evan on Twitter, at Big Game Theory on Instagram. Joey, do you have an Instagram that you want people to follow you?
Just follow the IDP guys account.
Awesome. There we go. That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for listening. It has been a pleasure hosting this with Joey. So we will see you guys the next time we have one of these. But in the meantime, good luck this week and peace out.
Enjoy.